Okay, guys. Just gonna do something a little bit different. You can see in front of me, I've got the Racing Bitch WordPress blog site open in front of me. Just doing this. I just about got to the stage where I was gonna pull the pin. Just sort of couldn't see what was worthwhile. And I read his latest post, and it sort of just reinforced to me the exact reason why I actually do it. So we might actually run through that. So. He more or less, I've just highlighted a couple of things here. Starts with a quote from Russell Keating that obviously racing's in a quandary. The only people who go are the ones who still sort of dreaming about the good old days. Clubs are still very short-sighted. Like you can sit at home and watch it all for free, even in Tassie with the live stream. Yet a lot of clubs still want to charge you to get in and pay $5 for a bucket of chips that has about 8 in it, and hobby photographers can't take photos anymore for their own approved. Clubs want their own approved images. What gets out? Racing riders are getting thrown out the door for trying to put it politely, sort of only the Sky Channel, the younger attractive set tend to get first dibs nowadays. But from an outside, we keep hearing that racing's still going okay, turnover's up, like the almighty turnover. As he says here, such short-sighted, constipated views are the death knell and needs to be addressed by some new knowledgeable blood. So, and I think sort of new knowledgeable blood, if we just think about racing in general, it tends to be a bit of a closed shop in that most people are employed from within the racing industry. Like if a new position opens up, it's either filled internally or somebody from another racing jurisdiction gets the gig. So we get the same old ideas rehashed, no fresh blood. So, and a couple of things here. So, knowing some in charge of producing the racing product, very few think about this from a customer point of view. I've underlined that, obviously. Nor have any thoughts of going out on a limb and taking even any baby steps to improve the situation. Cosmetic changes are not exactly providing the facelift horse racing needs as we approach 2018. So, that's it. Like cosmetic changes, it's if we just think from Tasmanian perspective, the live stream was, excellent initiative. But if you're going to do things like that, you've got to go in balls deep. You can't just, we'll put that out there and see how it goes and just do the bare minimum. You either got to commit to it or not bother at all. Customers deserve better. And it's a bit like sort of the analogy here that radio interview, which not too sure why racing clubs still think radio is a necessary medium, but anyway, he just says that he's like had his head stuck in the mobile of his Nokia, the phone, while the rest of the world's graduated to iPhones. And that's actually a very good analogy if we think about it, that racing still tends to be doing things the same way 20 years on, despite the world evolving. And probably this sentence here is the one that probably hits home the most. The problem faced by every racing club is when there are racing executives too set in their ways. Already sort of touched on that. We always hear about references to technology and going digital. You only got to look at the Tas Racing annual report. I think those two words are high up on the front page. But if you sort of go behind those headings, it's what they say here, it's still only about feeding the hunger to gamble. All comes back to turnover. And that results in racing doesn't look good for those looking in. So here one former jockey put it, this process makes racing look grubby to outsiders. And not once have any of these executives uttered the expression known as consumer-generated content. Consumer-generated content, just in its rawest form, is doing what your customer wants you to do. And obviously doing what your customers want. Like most companies now spend fortune on market research and consumer sentiment and that type of thing. And that's all in the world that they want to sort of understand their target market, make themselves more consumer friendly, which gambling sadly misses the mark. So, but we can only live in hope. So, I think sort of if we just look back at sort of stuck in the dark ages, I've just virtually this the other week. So this is the Hobart Harness preview in June 2005. So 12 years ago, and it looks starkly familiar. We've got some general write-up at the top, race by race selections and ratings, and we've got a best bet, a value bet, and a roughie. So whilst the entire world has since 2005 evolved and changed and everything, good old harness racing, this is not just a Tasmanian thing, it's a national epidemic, this. Just think since 2005 we've had, I think the iPhone was introduced in 2008, YouTube was about 2006, 2007, Facebook and Twitter weren't around yet. We're still sending out the same way. Actually, if truth be told, this is probably better than the product we get nowadays. So it's it's a lot less clutter. Anybody reading it's just bang. It's not sort of saying 8 horses have a chance if they get the right run. So, and it's the other thing too. Like if you want to try, keep hearing all this turnover dribble, but the people they're paying to do this type of stuff, they're totally unaccountable for results. Like, actually got the last 12 months of harness tipsters here. So you got Matty Robinson plus 8%. Just pick out the Tassie ones. So you got Jamie and Colin down here, minus 27 and minus 32%. That's over 12 months. But I highly doubt any person in charge has paid any attention to how the results are faring, whether it is actually driving turnover and that type of thing. So it's, like the one thing any paid tipster, they're usually very good at pumping up their own tyres and sort of putting lipstick on a pig, for lack of a better expression. But people just have to be accountable. If you're getting paid to provide, in any normal world, if you're being paid to do a job, you're expected to provide results. So anyway, but that's where we're at. But as I said, but this thing here, like 2005, in 12 years, we haven't done anything in the way this preview's actually set out or anything like that. That's bordering on embarrassing. So but anyway, it's the one thing, like I said, I was thinking of pulling the pin. You just get sick of being critical, but unfortunately there's not too many independent voices in the racing game anymore. That's not going crook at those who actually have a bit of a voice in the industry, because it's purely economic. Like they're all compromised. Like they can't. Most of them are employed by the governing bodies. They then write the articles that appear in the press. So the press never gets. Only get the one-sided sort of company-driven viewpoint, and it's obviously career suicide if anybody veers from that directive. But if we just, so from my perspective, like, obviously probably a lot of people out there far better equipped to make comment and things like that. But in my own defence, I think I've probably got a fair background that enables me to make comment. So without sounding too egotistical, I've got sort of background in I understand the business side of it, so I can't get baffled by, like I can look at a spreadsheet on the annual report and understand that there might be a certain one-off event that's created an inflated net loss or net profit figure. So I can look behind the heading and understand it. Obviously, university educated in economics and maths, so probably lucky enough to do that, and obviously punted for a long period of time. Also worked for Australia's biggest bookmaker at the time in Mark Reed, and obviously that gave me a excellent insight into both sides of wagering, what trends, how sort of punters, when they bet, what types of bets they like, and the other. So if I just go back through my work history as well, like from the marketing side of things, I've got a pretty good understanding there as well. Like, I think branding's the one thing that racing really struggles with, like how it brands itself in the as a product, how it's perceived by the general public. Like when I was in the sports management side of things, I was fortunate enough to have a portfolio consisting of, some of the biggest names in Australian sport. Like we had, Ian Thorpe, Liesl Jones, John Eales, Robbie Slater, Matt Rogers. And when obviously all of those, when we had sort of meetings with Foxtel and Holden and big companies like that, we'd sort of, if we were sort of selling those individuals, would actually brand them all differently. So, and that's the one thing, obviously, with Tassie in particular, it all tends to come under the same umbrella. You can't market greyhound racing the same as you market harness racing, the same as you market gallops. It needs to have that diversity in, but unfortunately we keep going back to the demon dollar there again. But I said, so I think that sort of, that background probably gives me as much of a right as any to make comment. Also can never be accused of having a particular agenda to push, which tends to be a bit of an issue with racing. Those in charge are compromised a little in that they're never going to vote for anything that's going to make them worse off, even though it might be for the betterment of the product. So, that's where I'm coming from there. So what else? As I mentioned, I touched on social media there before, like in the past 12 years. Like I just think since this article was written, like even, like we're still doing this exactly the same way. Yet, we're totally ignoring the two growth areas of the industry, which is fixed odds wagering and Betfair. Now, you imagine any normal business if they totally neglected the growth areas. I previously made reference to like Blockbuster and Kodak as they got stuck in their, we'll just keep serving up the same old, consumers will continue to lap it up. Well, we all know where they are now, they're non-existent. But you just think of social media, there seems to be a push from authorities that they're that wary of anybody saying anything half negative. They don't want any of their participants actually having a voice on social media. Like, seriously, you should be virtually encouraging them, and obviously there's lines that can't get crossed. You can deal with that at the time, but where do you only got to think to yourselves? Like, where do you get most of your news from nowadays? It comes back to that consumer driven marketing. Like none of us sort of learn about things on in the newspaper or even on the 6 o'clock news. We tend to find it all out via social media. Encourage people to have a voice, put their names out there. Like there's precious few actually embrace it. Like just off the top of my head, who have we got? Actually, the studs in Tassie do a pretty good job. The Grenville and Armidale, Ensign Lodge, Yoles do have a pretty good presence on Facebook. You only got to think of, we've been critical of them over time, but corporate bookmakers do it better than anybody. They understand what their market is and sort of identify with it. So, and even a few paid tipping services out there, like they really understand it and sort of nail it as well. Like they're ahead of the curve on this. When I say ahead of the curve, they're probably on a par with the rest of the world, but they're just miles in front of the dinosaurs who make the racing decisions. If I just hark back to like when for a while there, I was sort of giving all the information away for free and stuff. I thought, I should charge for this. And just from that, I got 37 responses from people who were willing to pay. And that gobsmacked me. I was expecting like 10, 15 maximum. And just makes, you just think about how many people actually do follow. And if I charged, I'd be, because obviously a lot of people out there wouldn't be willing to pay. So you could probably double. So I probably got near 100 people sort of value what I've got to say, etc. So, so I do have sort of some little audience out there. I always joke it's a bit like the reverse Robin Hood. He took from the rich and gave to the poor. I was sort of tipping the poor old punters to give to the rich in the old bookies, but I guess we don't always lose. But but just above all, it was just showed me that people did care about what I'm doing here, and that an independent voice is needed. See, like that independence thing I just mentioned, like there's nobody else. Whether you agree with me or not, I'm the sole person out there who's going to call it as he sees it. Like any participant, licensed person says anything half derogatory, gets called in and gets fined. It's a bit communist China about it. Like, they like to control the message. But it's the one thing I said, like, nobody likes criticism. Like, I sure as hell don't. But when you've actually got the livelihoods of participants at stake, and a lot of them are frustrated, and they haven't got a single voice or avenue because, as I said, the media is compromised. So 20, 30 years ago, if someone didn't agree with something, they'd write an in-depth article in the local paper or, similar, outlining issues and problems. But now we get all that sort of watered down and diluted because of the lack of media exposure. So whether you like me or not, I'm as good as you're going to get. But as I said, like, the turnover world, we need to really embrace it. And like if you just think of turnover as a whole at the expense of the product, it's only going to finish one way. Like, I don't watch too many reality TV shows. But from what I have seen, those shows spend as much time on the backstories of the people. Like, everybody knows that, I don't know, I'll just pick a name out here. Just Florette. Yeah, just say Florette's on X Factor. After 2 episodes, we know that Florette's she's a barista, still studying, who lives in certain town. She's got a boyfriend. So we know as much about that as we do about how she can sing. I'd venture to say, who won the 2 premierships this year? David Perez and Todd Rattray's winning the harness one at the moment. If either of those walked into your average TAB in Tasmania, I'd gather to say they'd be lucky to be 1 in 20 people recognise them. Now, we really need to concentrate on the individuals as much as the product. Like, have a pseudo reality TV type thing. I've been tossing up the idea whether to have like a weekly podcast just to chat to an individual for an extended period of time about their background, where they come from, interest outside of racing. You get to know the individual a little bit. I might sort of look into doing that down the track anyway. So that's about where I've come from. A little bit haphazard in where I've gone here, but as I said, we're still in a democracy. Actually, talking reminds me of that quote from the former Democrats leader, Don Chipp, as his name. His catchphrase was "keeping the bastards honest." So anyway, I might run with that, and we might just leave it there. So anyway, until next time, cheers, guys.